37th parallel on America's haunted highway, it's Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back yet again to another episode of Pixelated Paranormal. So, again, it's just me and you, buddy, because Steven is tied up with some stuff, so that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, because you and I are way too cheap for therapy, and I think we're going to need this episode to get over something, so... We had grandiose plans for a really big show about gnomes. We're going to get back into the cryptid encounters and all that kind of stuff. Tiny fairy folk. But then we suffered a huge blow between last episode and today. And first we lost David Bowie, and then we lost Robin Williams, Stephen Hawkins. We lost Prince. And fucking now we lost Stan Lee. Yeah, so I think it's a good thing Steven's not here, because if he was here, he'd be present to see the two of us crying into our microphones.
Out of all of those that have passed away within the last 2 years, really the ones that have hit me the hardest were Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver, David Bowie, and now Stan Lee. Stephen Hawking was a brilliant scientist, and his theories have really changed modern thinking, but I don't think he was like one of my childhood heroes as much as Bowie, Stan Lee, and Weiland was. So
Hawkins was more of like a adult hero. Once I got old enough to start thinking about science more, and then being more aware of it, it finally kind of hit me like a ton of bricks when he passed. But yeah, David Bowie and for me, Robin Williams and Stan Lee, like those were three people that I always really loved watching and seeing, and they were so influential on so many different levels, man. And I was actually at work when Corey had texted us.
That was me.
Did you? No, I thought Corey texted us.
I was the first one. I said Stan Lee died ? Because I was in shock. Like I wanted somebody else to confirm it.
What? Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, you text me that, and I was like, no, we've had 4,000 of these, bogus claims, and it's just a false alarm. And I hit Twitter, and like all of a sudden, like TMZ is reporting on it and everything else. And thankfully, I was on my lunch break because I cried. Yeah, I cried a little bit.
Got a little teary-eyed.
Yeah, it's a pretty big blow, man. He was such a huge powerhouse, and with him, together with phenoms like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and John Romita Sr. and countless others, they not only saved Marvel Comics or what it was before Marvel Comics, but Marvel Comics as we know it, but also as comic books as a whole. There's no alternate reality for us in the real world on this earth, but I would think that I don't even know if we'd really have the DC comics as we have today without, Stan Lee and that group of guys to influence comics back then.
Yeah. I think, one of the quotes that I posted on Facebook after his death talked about how, Stan Lee was a guy that really went out there almost like one of those sideshow presenters, because he, went to every corner, and then promoted because everybody back in the day thought that, this is just childhood, child fantasy, child stories. Like there's nothing to comics. Like it's a very just kind of dry, unimportant thing. And to him,
they were funny papers. And Timely Comics, that's what they did. They just posted your cheap, funny papers, penny papers and stuff like that.
And he was the guy that said, no, there's something more to it. And he showed the world that, hidden inside every person is that imagination of a child. And, there's this ability to carry this important lesson, this important story. And, I was thinking, back when we were planning this episode tonight, when I was a kid, like one of the main childhood shows that we always watched was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And, Mr. Rogers always said, like, I love you for who you are, like everybody's special. but there, there was never really any story or anything behind that. And like, I think that's what Stan Lee did with comic books. Like, he showed that
Oh yeah.
everybody's talented and everybody's special, but he did it in such a way with these amazing stories that, he tackled racism, tackled being gay and things like that with these characters,
Yep.
and made you fall in love with these characters in such a way that, I mean, yeah, it's such a tremendous blow losing him.
It's really unbelievable, man. And that's it's funny. I've had that later on in the notes about Stan Lee and Marvel Comics, especially Stan Lee primarily. It really taught us a lot about acceptance and tolerance. With racism and sexuality, with the X-Men, and with great power comes great responsibility through Spider-Man and all these characters. And at the end of the day, they weren't just little kids like, oh, gee whiz, you just solved the mystery. It was, regular people fighting normal problems. Peter Parker had to fight Dr. Octopus, but also had like a giant zit on prom night, and he could go out there and just, toss it up with the best of them. And then he still had to worry about a date to prom or how to pay the electricity bill for his Aunt May, like legitimate problems that we all had. And with X-Men, with X-Men and characters he developed later on, he made playgrounds safe for, people of color.
Yeah.
He made it okay to be on a playground and playing with, different colored skin. You could have heroes that were black, heroes that were girls. It wasn't just, the blue-eyed, square-jawed, blonde white man's game anymore.
Yeah. And he actually really gave us, if you think about it, he gave us very important, racial characters. Like before, Black Panther or before Falcon, like all your minority characters were never the serious ones. They always had very small, unimportant roles. And, he was the first one that started developing these characters and really gave us strong, minority characters. Like growing up as a kid, like Falcon with the afro and that 70s vibe. Like,
right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's crazy to see, man. And like back when he worked at Timely Comics, he went from being like the intern, like filling up coffee cups and making sure everybody had their ink pens and their shit. They probably used freaking inkwells back then, I bet. But made sure everybody had the equipment they needed. And secretly, he was a pretty decent writer.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people realize, but he was more than just a comic book editor and writer. He was a brilliant author. And if you guys ever have a chance, regardless or irregardless of your religious beliefs, check out a poem that he wrote called God Woke. And it's just kind of a story about, God waking up and looking down at the earth and seeing what his creations have turned into. And it's a pretty good read. If nothing else, it lets you see what an actual writer he was. It has nothing to do with, people catching on fire or swinging from webs. It's just a man who just wrote really, really well. He was an amazing author.
Yeah.
Among so much other stuff, but...
And, my childhood was filled with collecting Marvel Fleer cards. And so I have all the Spider-Man from 93 to 97, all the X-Men from 93 to 97. I have crates of fucking comic books like Spider-Man, X-Men, you name it, I have it.
Yeah. Yep. I'm the same way. That's where our initial friendship, I think, blossomed from. You and me was comic books. I was chasing after that white whale I had of that Juggernaut Marvel Legends action figure, and I had been looking for like 10 years for that stupid thing. And then here you are like, oh, I've got like 3 of them. So if you want one, just, it's yours. And then you're like, I'm still looking for these X-Men cards from 1994. And I'm like, I got an incomplete set. Right.
And then it was love.
Right. Yeah. And what was interesting too about Stan Lee, getting back to his earlier years, there's a really famous quote he had where he says, I used to be embarrassed because I was just a comic book writer while other people were building bridges, going to medical careers, and I began to realize entertainment is one of the most important things in people's lives. Without it, they might go off the deep end. I feel like if you're able to entertain people, you're doing a good thing. And it's crazy to see like that guy going that far in his career and then also second guessing his own career path. But he's right. He influenced so many people because way beyond just the comic books and the card collecting, like you learn so many values, and you could escape the real world, by reading those comics. And no matter how bad your day was at school or at work, you could run home and crack open one of these comics and just get lost for a little while and imagine what it's like to be somebody else, or just realize that maybe you don't have it so bad when, Spider-Man can't afford to keep the lights on in his own apartment, or he too is having women's troubles, stuff like that. But
Tony Stark was an alcoholic.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, he what's it called? The monster I forget what the issue is called. Something about a monster in a bottle, or the bottom of a bottle, or whatever. But yeah, they actually focus a little bit on that on Iron Man 2, when he gets plastered and he has to duck out for a little while, and he gets in that huge fight with War Machine because he's just shit-faced and plastered all the time. But we don't have much of a news story, but I do have one piece in here. It's a news story about how basically Bill Maher is a giant asshole.
Actually,
did you hear about this?
No, but it's actually a piece of shit. So
I didn't know how to censor that. Asshole or piece of shit. He's an asshole piece of shit.
Yeah.
So this was all over online shortly after Stan Lee had passed away. And I'll just kind of read it. I didn't really have time to paraphrase it, but it says here that TV personality Bill Maher is in hot water recently all across social media for a blog post which he questions the legitimacy of comic books as a medium, dropping Stan Lee's name and disrespecting the recently deceased in the process. So in his blog, he slams Americans for, quote, using their smarts on stupid stuff. And he goes on to point out that fans were overreacting, in his opinion, to moments following Lee's passing. The guy who created Spider-Man and the Hulk has died, and America is in mourning, Maher said. Deep, deep mourning for a man who inspired millions to, I don't know, watch a movie, I guess. Someone on Reddit posted, I'm so incredibly grateful I live in a world that includes Stan Lee. And then Maher goes on to say, I personally am grateful I live in a world that included oxygen and trees, but to each his own. Now, I have nothing against comic books. I read them now and then when I was a kid, and I was all out for Hardy Boys. But the assumption everyone had back then, both as adults and kids, was that comics were for kids, and when you grow up, you moved on. Big boy books without the pictures. And then he goes on to blah, 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 saying that dumb people got to be professors as they wrote papers about these comic book characters. 20 years ago or so, something happened. Adults decided they didn't have to give up kid stuff. And so they pretended comic books were actually sophisticated literature, and because America has over 4,500 colleges, which means we need more professors than we have smart people, some dumb people got to be professors by writing these, with titles like Otherness and Heterodoxy in the Silver Surfer. And now, when adults are forced to grow up and do things like buy auto insurance, they call it adulting and act like it's some giant struggle. On a side note, I hate that. I fucking hate that term adulting too.
I mean, I use it to make fun of situations like, oh my God, I adulted today. Like, I mean, it's part of being an adult. Like, it's just like, you fucking deal with it. Like, I don't get what the big deal is, but, you know what? Yep. Fuck you, Bill Maher. We're not already done.
Right. Yeah, fuck you. He seems like a man who's got a feeble attempt just to grasp at some controversy to make ratings go up. But I just don't think he gets it. I feel like that's all it really honestly is. Yeah. It's just a cheap grab at some ratings and just to be on the tip of everybody's tongue because, like we just said, Stan Lee did a lot for people. He had another famous quote about basically addressing this whole entire thing of like, are comic books for kids or adults or what? And Stan goes on to say that, quote, the man next to you, he's your brother. That woman over there, she's your sister. And the kid walking by, hey, who knows? He may have proportionate strengths of a spider. We're all one big family, the human family. And we all come together in the body of Marvel. And you're part of that family. You're part of the Marvel universe that goes upward and onward to greater glory. In other words, Excelsior. So, I hit Twitter after this happened just to kind of see what was going on because I was, like I always do with these big things, I go to Twitter and see what everybody's saying. And I found this girl, her name was Alayeni EQ, and on her Twitter she had said, I'm standing here today because of comic books and fantasies. As a little girl who watched her mother die, if I hadn't had a fantasy world with heroes and magic to disappear into, I never would have escaped that grief. That's just me. Imagine how many others he saved. And it's a complete stranger, and that's kind of the cool thing about Twitter. Sometimes you can have actual, meaningful conversations with strangers. And so I replied back to her, and I said, well said. Stan Lee was a legend and most likely saved many of us from some pretty dark holes in our life that we fell into. Dark places that nothing can save us from, nothing except for webs, claws, lasers, ink, and the smell of old paper. Cheers. Mm-hmm. I'm going to butcher her name, Allegheny. And then she replies back, thank you. And then it just goes on like this very beautiful, loving conversation between all these strangers. And this guy says, not to mention his insistence on trying to teach kids and adults how to grow up and be decent people, to never give up, that friends can be family when you've lost it all. And then he puts, it references X-Men, and anyone can be a hero in their own right if they help somebody. And then she says, X-Men was my favorite. That was the reason I felt that was my favorite for that reason, because I always felt so alone. This guy goes on to say, I'm glad they could help you see you weren't alone in this world. You just needed those who would welcome you into their hearts and be friends and the family you needed. And of course, it goes on and on and on. And then it just kind of envelops into this giant, oh yeah, comics saved me this way, comics saved me that way. So in short, fuck you, Bill Maher.
Yeah. I mean, I think he did. I think he did miss what's the phrase? Miss the buck, miss the bullet, miss the mark.
Yeah,
because growing up as a kid, that's one thing that inspired me as far as art goes. Because I would go to these comic conventions or record conventions or garage sales. And you would see these comic books, and that became a bonding thing between me and my dad, because he would always here's $1, go get what you want. And then you know, I would look
back when $1 could get you something.
Yeah. And he even would get excited at Christmas just to watch me open these box sets of cards, and then we would spend time opening them up together and going through them. And then I would spend my days copying this artwork from my favorite cards, and and now I've kind of passed that on to my son, because he likes to look at my action figures, and I tell him that they're collectibles, because when you're adults, they're collectibles and not action figures. But we share.
They're not dolls.
Yeah, they're not dolls, damn it. But and even with my stepdaughter, we share that passion, because as a family we go out to these movies, and we as a family we watch Black Panther, or we watch Infinity Wars, and now I'm sharing that experience with my kids that I got from my father. And so it's a lot more than just children's fairy tales or make believe or little boy books with pictures, because of all the different meanings that are associated with it. So you know what, fuck you, Bill Maher. Go fucking choke on a dick.
I almost choked on my water just now. That should be the title of the episode. Fuck you, Bill Maher. Oh yeah, man. That's funny you mentioned that. That's the exact same way I learned how to draw. Is I taught myself by, when I was in first grade, tracing over pictures of Spider-Man from coloring books and comic books, and then slowly learning how to draw it, piece by piece on my own, looking at it. And then, it got me where I am today. Yeah. I mean, I like to think I'm halfway decent at drawing, and it's all from comics. And then I used to love, being, let me rephrase that. I didn't love being colorblind. Being partially colorblind, I used to love racing home after school and grabbing these comic books, and the bright, vibrant colors you could see on there, made the pages come to life. And it also helped me, see a world that I was kind of missing in some aspect. And you relate to that too.
Yeah.
We're both broken.
Yeah. Fucking Wolverine with that fucking blue and yellow color scheme. Those motherfuckers pop.
Right. That's right. You're more of an earthy tones when he was the brown and yellows, huh? But yeah, I used to love it, man. The colors and just the fighting, and the way you could draw a human body swinging through the air or crawling up a wall. And then, just like you said, stacks and stacks of comics. I would go to garage sales too and just buy comics. I didn't care what they were, who they were of. If there's a Spider-Man shit, yeah, I'm going to buy that in a heartbeat. But
and that fucking smell of the paper, that paper has such a unique smell. Nothing smells like a fucking comic book.
It's funny you said that because I've got Amazing Spider-Man issue 363 in my hand, and I haven't opened this thing out of its little protective sleeve in probably 10 or 15 years, and it has that smell. I smelled it while you were saying that, and it still has that smell. It still has that. The pages are a little yellowed, but it still has that kind of soury paper smell that, yep. That's it, man. Just stacks of comic books on your bed and your nightstand and just digging into them.
Yeah.
And then the comic cards, too. We were just talking about that, and you said, yeah, hey, I've got a card of the Wendigo, and the one I pictured is the kind of bluish beast behind the hunter from the 94 Fleers. And then sure as shit, that's a card you sent me. We'll get to Wendigo here in a minute because I have something funny to say about that, or interesting, or just plain stupid. But yeah, it's good to talk about it, man. We took a huge blow, and we all knew he was going to die eventually. Like, the man's 95 when he passed away, but yeah, it just kind of sucks. You just got to rip the Band-Aid off, but it still hurts, you know.
Which I think that that hopefully that they have his cameo in the next, we'll get to see him in Miss Marvel?
Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. And then, hopefully we'll get to see him in Avengers 4. And that's kind of bittersweet. So,
yeah, that was a fun little game to play of, where's he going to be now? And I think if I read the proper source, we should get one more in Captain Marvel, the next Infinity War or Avengers, and also in the new Spider-Man. I believe they got him in that too.
Oh, good deal.
But I mean, there's still plenty of ways to put him in there. Even if you don't want to CGI his face in there, you could still have, billboards or comic books or stuff like that. Or there's creative ways.
Deadpool 2, he was one of the busts in the X-Men mansion. And when Deadpool was in the Xavier wheelchair, he knocked into it, knocked it over, and broke it. So...
Oh, foreshadowing. Another, I guess they're trying to pass an actual petition right now, is that moving forward, because Marvel now kind of has the rights back to all their shit, like Disney owns the rights to all those again, to put Deadpool in every Marvel movie, but wearing the Stan Lee double bridge glasses and a mustache and the sunglasses, yeah.
Dude, that'd be so fucking great.
It'd be pretty great, wouldn't it? It'd be campy, I think, after a minute, but he would be the only character cinematically who could do that in his own right and still be true to form, being that fourth dimension hopper. But
yep.
Still pretty rad. Speaking of Deadpool, did you see the trailer for the new Deadpool re-release? Have you heard anything about that?
No, what the fuck's going on with that?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so hang on. Awkward pause here. Let me look it up real quick. Did you ever see, I think it was Princess Bride that had Fred Savage in it?
Yeah.
And so Fred Savage is sick at home from school, and his dad's reading him the fairy tale, and that's the movie we see, is his dad telling him the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay, so Deadpool 2 is being re-released in theaters for a limited time engagement for Christmas, but it's going to be a PG-13 cut.
What?
And they're calling it Once Upon a Deadpool. And basically the shtick is that Deadpool kidnaps Fred Savage and reads him the Deadpool 2 movie, just like his dad did back on Princess Bride. I'll send you the trailer. It's really great. Everybody should look it up. But yeah, he made the joke about, we could do this, but only if Fred Savage, agreed to join in. And then Fred Savage is like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. I want to do it. So they got together and they shot all the additional scenes in one day. And so it's gonna be the same movie, but it's gonna be a PG-13 cut. It's rumored there may be additional scenes put in there as well to make it a slightly different movie. But yeah, then you're going to have all the extras, probably 8 or 10 different scenes they're going to break from the movie and get back to the dialogue between Fred and Deadpool. But I think it's going to be pretty sweet. I'm excited to see it. But, what's funny is Steve and I were talking when we were on the way to Kentucky. It's actually kind of smart because Disney's really nervous about Deadpool because they got the rights back to that as well. And they know how popular it is. Mm-hmm. And it would be a huge, cutting your own foot off if you're like, sorry, guys, we don't do R-rated movies. And Steve's like, you can do it now. You can do a full-on, unrated, R-rated Deadpool 3 in theaters, and then you just have to release simultaneously or shortly after that a PG-13 cut.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it's brilliant. Like, why wouldn't you do that? And I said, well, shit, it's almost a genius plan because people are going to see that movie twice.
Yeah.
Because I'll probably go catch Once Upon a Deadpool on a Friday night or maybe a $5 Wednesday night at the Old Town Warren. I want to see what's different about it.
Because I'll feel like less of a bad parent letting my son watch Once Upon a Deadpool versus the rated R. Like, Daddy wants rated R for himself, but then I need the PG-13 version for the kiddos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because there's some stuff in there that kids shouldn't see.
Yeah.
Oh man, listen to us. Yeah, but all in all, what a shitty week losing Stan Lee, man.
Yeah.
I need to go through now and try to pick up some of his earlier stuff and read some of his earlier comics. Well, with all that sadness and somber talk, it wouldn't be Pixelated Paranormal unless we talked about some weird shit. So, kind of keeping on the same topic of comic books, we're going to get into a few of our favorite paranormal creatures who actually have their own characters based in the Marvel Universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty short list. We've only got 3. But, we put together kind of a quick list of Marvel cryptids. And the first one, Presto, I had never heard of. Did you ever hear of the Abominable Snowman in Marvel? Nope, me neither. So the first one on our list here is going to be the Abominable Snowman, a.k.a. Yeti. And I'll just kind of go over some quick, biographies of these characters. And this is going to be back in the 1960s, and that's probably why you and I missed it, because this was back from like the old Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, probably Ditko as well, 1960s Tales to Astonish from Marvel Comics. But it says here, for centuries, man has wondered about the mysterious creature living in the wintry climates that may or may not hold ill will towards humanity. Readers of the 1960s Tales to Astonish number 13 get some answers. While hanging out in the Calcutta bar, Big Carl Hansen overheard a man talking about a photo he'd gotten off another bloke of the Abominable Snowman. In an attempt to alleviate the gent of his newfound responsibility and potential fortune, Big Carl ambushed him outside and relieved him of the supposed cursed photo. And what that means is he stole the picture from him after kicking his ass. Carl then hopped a train to the Himalayas. With big plans formulating about actually capturing the snowman for himself. Upon arrival, many natives told him that the picture would lead to his absolute ruin. But unperturbed, Carl trudged into the mountains alone in search of his quarry. No matter how many obstacles stood in his way, Big Carl continued on his search, bullheadedly. He stomped through snow, assuming he could survive, only to lose himself in the process. By the end, he actually began to grow long hair, get accustomed to the icy chill of the wind, and soon became the Abominable Snowman himself, perfectly matching the image he carried in his pocket.
I am super duper cereal.
So yeah, that's like the first of our cryptids way back in the 60s. Is basically the dude set off to capture a Yeti, and in a Twilight Zone twist of fate, soon became the Yeti himself.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right? Oh, man. And the next one is one that you and I both know pretty well, and that is of good old Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Yeah, buddy. Now, you had a card. Did the card you have about Sasquatch, did it have a biography about him on it?
No, I mean, it didn't, because basically, so it was the 96 flare, because he wasn't in like 94, 95, but in like 96, they did Weapon X and then Department H, which Wolverine was in both of those. And so Sasquatch was part of the Department H. And so basically, you get the artwork, which is fucking amazing on the front of the card. And then when you turn over the back of the card, it did give you like a quick bio, but it basically just said like, this is Sasquatch's real name. He appeared in like these comics. And then the back of the card was just like an excerpt of one of the comic stills. So the 96, they didn't really go into much detail. Whereas one of the other characters we're going to talk about from 94, it did give a little bit of a bio. So.
Hell yeah. Well, the Sasquatch in Marvel Comics was a man by the name of Dr. Walter Langowski. He was a native of Vancouver, British Columbia, a professor of both physics and biophysics at McGill University, and a former football player for the Green Bay Packers. But when he wasn't throwing the old pigskin or solving physics, he also possessed the ability to transform into super strong, orange-haired beast resembling the legendary Sasquatch. And unlike the Incredible Hulk, it's pretty much kind of an Incredible Hulk type character. He could transform from his human form into this giant hulking beast. But the difference between Hulk and Sasquatch is that Langowski could actually transform at will. So in his transformed state, he had increased strength, stamina, resistance to injury, but he was also covered in long orange hair with giant sharp claws and sharp teeth, able to leap incredibly far distances.
And like, like the other thing too, like with the Hulk, is whenever Bruce Banner became the Hulk, it was almost like the brutish form of Bruce Banner, like very barbaric, very primitive. So like Hulk smash, me Hulk, me no like. Whereas like the Sasquatch, he was still very brilliant, very smart, and when he interacted with the characters, he's almost like a bigger badass version of Beast.
Yeah, kind of, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're exactly right. He maintained his humanity when he transformed. These powers were the result of Langowski's self-experimentation with gamma radiation. In an attempt to become like the Hulk, Langowski bombarded himself with gamma ray projectors at his laboratory near the Arctic Circle. As a proposed explanation for why he transformed into an orange instead of green behemoth, as gamma radiation prefers to turn people green, Langowski assumed it had something to do with the aurora borealis.
What?
Yeah, boy. But in reality, what happened was whenever he shot himself with gamma rays, it opened up a doorway to another dimension called the Realm of the Great Beasts. And when the realm opened up, a mysterious, a mystical beast called the Tanarak invaded Langowski's body, granting him his powers at will. But much like the Hulk in the beginning stages, the Sasquatch turned into kind of a mindless, angry beast, and Langowski actually had to practice and was eventually successful at putting his humanity into the creature when he transformed, thus, like you said, allowing him to be a very intelligent brute. And of course, there's comics where he's very well spoken, and there was one where like he has to save some hero who's dying in the tundra, and it shows this really sweet scene of him, hair blowing in the wind, fur blowing in the wind, and he's got this like Wolverine or somebody, and he's like, "Oh, let's get you into someplace warmer."
like my hairy arms.
You're right. Yeah. And here's a fun fact. In the 1993 miniseries, The Infinity Crusade, it's revealed that Sasquatch is Jewish.
What?
So fuck you, Hitler.
And fuck you again, Bill Maher.
Yeah. Just in case you're still listening, Bill. Yeah. So yeah, and dude, you saw the pictures. When we were in Kentucky, we went to a comic store, and they had a really cool bust of Sasquatch from like the waist up with his arms raised up in the air like he's either saying, you want to fight me, or like some kind of, angry yell. And I wanted that thing so bad, but I just couldn't part with $60 to take it home, and now I'm really kicking myself. I wanted it just because it was a fucking Sasquatch. It'd look cool on my desk next to all my paranormal books, but
no dice.
Maybe.
No.
Yeah, maybe I'll send Rob some money and have him pick it up for me and mail it to me.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, the last one we're going to get to here, Preston, you mentioned earlier, is the Wendigo, or the Vindigo, or the Wendigo. And first things first, you got that sweet little 1994 Flair Ultra card. Explain to us what this card looks like.
So you have like this very dark scene in the woods. So like you have like dark blues for the sky, and then like you're kind of like darker green gray pine trees, and there is a ghostly bluish white creature, the Wendigo, with like fucking Medusa hair thing going on.
Fabio hair.
Yeah, Fabio hair. And he's reaching out very maniacally toward a hunter, like with a little bomber hat and his a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And
like he's hunting Tom Selleck.
Yeah, pretty much with that mustache. And so when you turn it over, the back of the card, it says it'll give you the villain. So he's a villain card, number 77, and it'll give you the character's name, and then below it has a real name, and it's stated as it's unrevealed, so we don't know who the Wendigo is. And the group affiliation, he's none. He's not with any villainous group. He's just on his own out in the Canadian wilderness, kicking ass and taking names.
Mm-hmm.
And it says for powers, bestial strength, the strength and power of a savage beast. And then the little bio excerpt was, no one knows the name of the man cursed by the terrible power of the Wendigo, the mystical monster whose cravings can only be stated by the flesh of the living. Dun dun dun. Well, that's it.
Yeah, he. I didn't know a whole lot about Wendigos back when this card got released, and we've talked about Wendigos a little bit on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Up until about 6 months ago, I always thought the Wendigo basically was a type of creature like a Sasquatch.
Nope.
Yeah, I thought it was a big hairy beast that roamed the forest, kind of like a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, and just ate people. And then you started talking about the Algonquins and the Indians and how basically it's a spirit that punishes people and turns them into rabid cannibals and blah, blah, blah. It's based on greed and gluttonous behavior and everything else. So
if you ever want to see a really great movie that's kind of like a modern spin, Ravenous, that came out in like 2002, 2003.
Oh yeah,
great movie. It deals with that folklore and takes place in like the late 1800s and westward expansion when they're out in like California. And Robert Carlyle and God, what the fuck is that guy's name? He played the Mandarin in the third Iron Man.
Oh yeah, Ben Kingsley.
No, the real Mandarin, not the fake Mandarin.
Was there a real Mandarin in the movie?
Yeah, because Ben Kingsley played like the fake actor, but then the other guy that had like the fire power or whatever was supposed to be the real.
Oh, that wasn't the Mandarin. That was that wasn't the Mandarin.
What was that actor's name?
Oh God, here we go. Hang on. We were almost through, Preston. We almost made it. Iron Man 3?
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit here and be like, oh yeah, it was oh God, it was one of those names. He was the nerd that fucking Tony Stark blew off in the beginning of the first, part of the movie.
Yeah,
and becomes like this super fucking Aldrich Killian.
Yep.
Yeah, Guy Pearce.
Yeah. So it's got those two actors in it. Fucking amazing movie. Do yourself a favor. Solid 5 boinkins. Go watch it.
Right. Oh God. Well, back on track here. The Marvel character the Wendigo is more or less a vengeful spirit in a way, and not so much a flesh and blood creature like the Beast or Wolverine or even Sasquatch. The Marvel character is based on the Wendigo legend of the Algonquin peoples. The Wendigo is not one specific person, but instead is the manifestation of a curse that can strike anyone who commits an act of cannibalism in the Canadian northern woods. Originally, only one person can become the Wendigo at a time, which has led one Wendigo being cured if another person was struck by the curse. So basically, you were kind of screwed. If you weren't killed, you just kind of had to run around eating people until somebody else was a bigger asshole than you were. Bill Maher. In later years, it was revealed that a pack of Wendigos lived in the Bering Strait. At one point, the Wendigo curse infected the Hulk, turning him into the Wendahulk, although he was later cured. While normally depicted as a savage beast with no control, Wendigos have appeared as a part of various villainous groups, showing some restraint when not fighting. The curse is a regional curse located in the woods of northern Canada and takes place under the right conditions when a person in the forests of Canada feeds on human flesh. The curse of the Wendigo was created by the northern gods, also known as the Anua, in an effort to deter human cannibalism. The cannibal transforms into a superhumanly strong, nearly indestructible, fur-covered monster, the Wendigo. He or she then roams the woods eating human beings. The Wendigo frequently fights the Hulk, Wolverine, and the Alpha Flight. Blah, 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 blah. It gives you a list of everybody who's become the Wendigo. And a fun fact, the monster known as the Wendigo first appeared in The Incredible Hulk number 162 back in April 1973, where it fought Wolverine and the Hulk.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and in true giant monster fighting fashion, the Wendigo and Sasquatch have oftentimes gone toe-to-toe in the pages of Marvel Comics.
Hopefully Sasquatch wins every time.
Right, that's who we're rooting for. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. And I didn't know this either. Speaking of pop culture, did you ever finish watching Hannibal? Or ever watch Hannibal at all?
I did. I think Jeffrey and I polished it all off because I think I was upset
cool.
that there was no more, episodes to watch.
Yeah. So during some of those ethereal sequences, you have what I was always calling the Stag Man. It's kind of like that black, tarry-looking, emaciated creature with like deer horns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is called the Wendigo.
Oh.
I didn't know this, but Shayla got me the pop vinyl of the Wendigo for Hannibal, and the actual guy was called the Wendigo. And so that makes more sense because in traditional lore, Wendigos were more or less not giant, furry, Bigfoot creatures like I thought, but more or less they were said to be kind of like an emaciated zombie type creature who was always hungry, always thin, with an insatiable appetite. So that's why on the Hannibal TV show, that kind of dream sequence creature was always so thin and emaciated because it basically represented the cannibalism that Lecter was experiencing.
Uh-huh.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. And then, of course, the Wendigo supposedly is rumored to be in Fallout 76 as well.
Oh, speaking of that, because I didn't want to do it without you, I did get that as a miscellaneous mission when I was playing the other night.
Oh, really?
And it's titled Kill a Wendigo with a Clown Suit.
Well, buddy, I think we know what we're doing when we get off of here. Yep. Oh, God. Yeah. Well, dude, I think that's a good place to put a pin in it. I think that was cathartic, and it felt good to get that out. And neither one of us shed a tear that I could tell, so that's a plus.
Came close. Came close.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I may have gotten a little quivery in there, but yeah, man. Long story short, Stan Lee, rest in peace.
Yeah.
And speaking of words of Stan Lee, did you know that the original phrase in Spider-Man was not "with great power comes great responsibility," but in fact, with great power there must also come great responsibility?
Oh, no, I never knew that.
I did not either. It was shortly, I think, in a lot of dream sequences and flashback sequences, shortened to "with great power comes great responsibility." But the original quote was, "with great power there must also come / or dash great responsibility." And it was not somebody saying it. It was pinned into one of the corner blocks, kind of like the narrator section of the comic. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, plug something, and then we'll get out of here.
Well, as always, want a beard, need a beer, want to grow an Excelsior beard? Then check out BigDopsBeardBomb.com, and Sean's going to hit you with the promo.
use promo code PXLPARA for 20% off your entire purchase. And then, check out Mark's solo cast show, Pixelated Sausage, where he delves into all sorts of crazy and zany and kooky pop culture. And Preston, what's my favorite race car podcast?
Sports Cars Unleashed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, check them out if you like cars that go fast.
Vroom, vroom.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, and then on a side note, I also want to mention, too, we just got our 15th rating on iTunes.
Oh, shit.
Another 5 out of 5, buddy. We're doing all right. We are 15 for 15.
Did they leave us a review?
No, but that's fine. I'll still take a 5-star rating. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
They know who they are.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do a little bit of upkeep and a little bit of a tune-up. I didn't realize... Oops, I just punched my microphone. I didn't realize that whenever we posted the show to iTunes and other platforms, Mark was adding a little bit of an extension on there. And at the very bottom, it had our contact information. It had a different email address that was paranormal@pixelatedsausage.com. Never knew that until today. So I did check that email, and if you sent us something to that email and you still listen to us, we didn't blow you off. I never knew that was an actual contact email.
And did we have emails?
There was some stuff in there. There was somebody from like some psychology department in Washington at a college.
Oh, shit.
And I think maybe some emails may have expired because I got a second email that said something like, hey, just trying to reach out to you and follow up, see if you got my last email. And then there was a third email that said, okay, I'll take that as a hint, blah, blah, blah. I won't bother you anymore. So I don't know what it was, if it was a phishing scam or what. And then there was another one that got me excited because it's like haunted house interview. And I clicked on it, and it was basically a scam of like, do you want to stay in a real haunted house? Then come to California and stay in this haunted house. We can get you sent with places like the Sharon Tate house and blah, 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 blah. Oh. And I was just thinking, that sounds kind of like spam. Yeah, so I did check that, but he's going to get that remedied and get our actual pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com email at the bottom of all of our emails, or all of our show notes. And then we did have a voicemail. We need to change our outro because apparently when Rob left the show, he deactivated that voicemail.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, didn't know that either, so apparently it just does not work. But yeah, so we're going to do a little bit of upkeep, folks, and freshen things up a little bit. But yeah, I think that'll do her. We'll be back next week, in fact, with our Cryptid Encounters Part 6, and we'll be talking about gnomes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much, for a little person, there is so much content.
I didn't know you could stack shit that tall, but apparently you can.
And then put a red hat on it. So, yeah. Oh, and also, before I forget, another quick shout out to the gals over at Fear and Fame podcast. We have been talking off and on with them on Instagram. They're another kind of, I don't want to say up and coming podcast because that seems like it's kind of, I don't know, a put down maybe, patronizing, but just another up and coming podcast. I don't mean that disrespectfully because we are the same, but yeah, they're a newer podcast out there and they talk about some true crime and some spooky stuff like that. And yeah, just a pretty good solid show. Check them out. They're cut from the same cloth, but just kind of a different end of the spectrum from what we talk about most of the time. But yeah, check them out. Fear and Fame podcast. And I think with that, we will cut it and we will catch you guys all next time.
Peace.
The cast at Pixelated Paranormal would like to thank you for listening to this week's episode. Pixelated Paranormal is here to tell you tales of the fantastical, the strange, the unknown. Tales that will move you a little further down the paranormal highway. If you'd like to share your own listener story, we would love to hear it. You have two ways. One, email us at pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. Again, that's pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we have that set up too. Dial us at 707-523 4263. Again, that's 707-523-4263. We'd really love to hear from you. Again, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.